The city of London buzzed like a restless heart. Neon signs flickered in the distance, buses hissed to a stop, and car horns tangled with the hurried footsteps of strangers. Among the noise walked Julian Thorne, a man who once lived in the roar of stadiums, cheered on by thousands, his name written in headlines. Yet now, with dark sunglasses covering his tired eyes and headphones drowning out the chaos, he was just another figure in the crowd. Julian wasn't just a retired football star, he was a man running from silence. Silence that came when the crowd stopped chanting, when the lights went out, and when the one person he thought would stand by him forever had disappeared without a goodbye. He had learned how to smile for interviews, how to pretend he was fine, but when the cameras switched off, the truth would always creep back. He was alone. This morning should have been like any other. A quick press appearance, a polite smile, and freedom from the spotlight for the rest of the day. He tugged at his jacket as he strolled down Oxford Street, inhaling deeply, as if trying to catch a piece of peace that always seemed to slip through his fingers. That was when it happened. A child's laugh cut through the noise, high, innocent, the kind of sound that made you stop without knowing why. Across the street, a little boy clutched his nanny's hand, skipping in sneakers that blinked with red lights at every step. His cap tilted sideways, his cheeks flushed with energy. The world to him was still magical, filled with wonder. But in the city, wonder could turn into danger in the blink of an eye. The nanny fumbled with her bag for just a second. That was all it took. The boy slipped free, giggling as if it were a game, running straight toward the busy street. Leo. "No, come back," the nanny screamed, her voice cracking with panic. Julian's head snapped up. His headphones slipped from his ears, dangling uselessly as time slowed. He saw the black car racing down the road. The driver didn't notice the child. The boy stumbled, tripping on the edge of the curb, his tiny arms flailing. Julian's instincts, trained on fields where every second counted, kicked in. He didn't think. He just moved. He sprinted, his legs pounding like thunder, heart hammering as he lunged forward. In one swift motion, he grabbed the boy by the collar of his little jacket and yanked him backward, just as the car screeched past. Tires screaming against the asphalt, but the boy's small body went limp in Julian's arms. His eyes fluttered shut, his breathing shallow, too shallow. Hey, little one. "Stay with me," Julian whispered, his voice breaking. The nanny's sobs pierced the air, her knees buckling as she clutched at her chest. There was no time to wait. No ambulance could reach them fast enough. Without hesitation, Julian lifted the boy into his arms, holding him close as though his own strength could keep him alive. He ran. The hospital was only a few blocks away, but every step felt endless. His lungs burned, sweat stung his eyes, but he pushed forward, weaving through startled pedestrians. The boy's stillness was heavier than any weight Julian had ever carried. "Please," Julian whispered, as he burst through the hospital doors. "Help him. Accident, please." Doctors and nurses rushed forward, their urgency slicing through the sterile air. The boy was taken from his arms and placed onto a stretcher. Julian stood frozen, chest heaving, as the doors slammed shut behind the medical team. The nanny stumbled in moments later, sobbing, repeating, "It's my fault. It's all my fault." Security tried to calm her, but her words only echoed in Julian's chest, mixing with the storm already raging inside him. He sat down heavily on the bench, burying his face in his trembling hands. He didn't know the child. He didn't know the family. But something inside him twisted painfully, as though fate itself had dragged him into this moment for a reason he couldn't yet understand, and that reason would walk through the hospital doors within minutes. The air seemed to still as the sound of hurried heels clicked against the tile floor. A woman's voice, low, urgent, trembling with fear, called out, "Where is my son? Where is Leo?" Julian's head shot up. His heart stopped. Standing at the reception, her face pale, her hair falling loose around her shoulders, was Amelia Carter, the woman he once loved more than life itself. The woman who had left him broken, vanishing into the shadows of the past he tried so hard to escape. She didn't see him at first. Her eyes were locked on the doors that had swallowed her child. But Julian saw her, and the world collapsed into silence again. The boy he had just saved was her son. The hospital lights seemed too bright, reflecting sharply off the polished floor as Amelia's frantic voice echoed in Julian's mind. He couldn't move, not at first, as though the weight of years pressed down on his chest, but then instinct tugged him to his feet. His hands shook, not from the sprint he had made, but from the sight of her, her face etched with panic, her eyes searching, pleading. For a moment he almost convinced himself this wasn't real, that his exhaustion had conjured her image out of memory. But no. She was here, alive, breathing, trembling, and every detail of her felt painfully familiar. The nurses tried to calm her, assuring her that the doctors were doing everything possible, but Amelia brushed past them, her voice breaking with desperation as she demanded to be taken to her son. Julian followed without thinking, his steps slow, heavy, each one carrying the risk of being noticed. His mind screamed at him to leave, to walk away before the storm of the past consumed him again, but his heart betrayed him, urging him forward. When Amelia finally turned, her tear-streaked eyes locked on him. Time stopped between them. Her lips parted in shock, her hand clutching the wall for support. And in that second, all the years of silence, anger, and heartbreak came rushing back. He had saved her child. She knew it. He could see it in her eyes. But what she didn't know was that the sight of her was undoing every wall he had built. Before either could speak, a doctor stepped out, his expression grave, and both their hearts seemed to freeze. What he was about to say would not only decide the fate of the child, but would reopen wounds that had never truly healed. Would this moment break them again, or force them to face the truth they had run from? The doctor's words cut through the air like a blade, calm but heavy with meaning. "He's stable for now, but we need to keep him under observation." Relief crashed over Amelia like a wave, her shoulders collapsing as tears rolled down her cheeks. She pressed her hands together, whispering a thank you that trembled out of her chest. Julian exhaled too, realizing only then that he had been holding his breath since the boy was taken inside. For a brief moment there was peace, fragile, delicate, but real. Yet peace couldn't last when the past had just walked back into the same room. Amelia finally turned to him, her eyes filled with both gratitude and something far harder to define. You saved my son," she whispered, her voice breaking, as though the words cost her something to say. Julian wanted to reply, to say it didn't matter, that anyone would have done the same, but that wasn't true. Deep down he knew fate had placed him there for a reason. Their silence stretched, thick and unspoken, until the doctor urged Amelia to go see her son. She hesitated, glancing back at Julian as if torn between the child who needed her and the man who still haunted her. Julian's chest tightened as he watched her walk away, her figure disappearing into the ward. He leaned against the wall, questions burning inside him. Why had she left all those years ago? Why hadn't she told him about this boy? A spark of suspicion flickered through his thoughts, dangerous and impossible to ignore. Could Leo be his son? The idea shook him so deeply it felt like the floor had shifted beneath his feet. And as he stood there, one truth became clear. No matter how much it hurt, he had to know. Julian paced the quiet corridor, every tick of the clock echoing like a hammer in his skull. The sterile air of the hospital did little to ease the storm building inside him. He could still see Amelia's face when she realized he had been the one to carry Leo in. Shock, gratitude, and something deeper she tried to hide. He wanted to walk away, to leave before the questions clawed their way out, but his feet refused to move. When Amelia finally stepped back into the hallway, her eyes red but her expression calmer, Julian's heart lurched. She hesitated when she saw him still there, as if part of her had hoped he would vanish like a ghost. For a long moment, they just stared at each other, the years of distance pressing between them like an invisible wall. Then Julian broke the silence, his voice low, trembling despite his effort to keep it steady. "Why didn't you tell me?" The words slipped out sharper than he intended, but he couldn't take them back. Amelia flinched, her lips parting as if to answer, but she looked away, clutching her arms tightly against herself. "It's not that simple," she whispered. The vague response only fueled the fire inside him. Not that simple. He had lived with her absence for years, wondering why she had disappeared, and now a child's face, so familiar, so haunting, was making his mind spiral. Before he could press further, a nurse approached, asking Amelia to sign some forms. She followed reluctantly, but not before glancing back at Julian, her eyes filled with words she couldn't yet speak. And as Julian stood frozen, one thought consumed him. The truth was closer than ever, and it might be more devastating than he was ready to face. Julian sat in the waiting area, his fists clenched as memories of Amelia swirled in his mind. Her laughter on summer nights, the promises they had whispered, and the sudden silence when she had vanished from his life. Now here she was, just a few feet away, holding a secret wrapped in the small, fragile body of a child who could very well be his own. He had questions building like a storm, yet every time he tried to form them, his throat closed. When Amelia returned, holding a clipboard of signed forms, she stopped in front of him. For a long heartbeat, they simply looked at one another, the weight of the years pressing down on them both. Finally, she broke the silence, her voice soft but steady. "Julian, you weren't supposed to see me again." Her words cut deeper than he expected, and he leaned forward, his eyes narrowing. "And yet I did. Fate put me here, Amelia. You think I can look at that boy and not see myself in him?" She froze, her lips trembling, her eyes glistening as she struggled to hold back tears. The denial he half expected never came. Instead, she whispered, "I was trying to protect him." "To protect you?" The room seemed to spin as Julian tried to grasp her meaning. Protect him? From what? From who? He wanted answers, but her sudden collapse into silence only sharpened the edge of his desperation. Before he could speak again, a nurse appeared, saying Leo was awake and asking for his mother. Amelia hurried past, but not before whispering a single sentence that left Julian reeling. "You deserve the truth, but I don't know if you're ready for it." Julian's pulse thundered as he followed Amelia into the dimly lit ward. His footsteps hesitant, every muscle tight with anticipation. He stopped at the doorway, unable to cross the line that separated him from the child lying on the bed. Leo's small frame looked fragile against the crisp white sheets, his eyes half open, clinging to his mother's hand. The boy's soft voice whispered, "Don't cry, Mama. I'm okay." Amelia brushed his hair back gently, her trembling smile hiding the weight of her fear. Julian stood frozen, watching the scene with an ache so deep it nearly split him apart. The boy's features, the tilt of his chin, the shape of his eyes, mirrored his own reflection from old photographs. It wasn't just imagination anymore. It was truth staring him in the face. Amelia glanced up, her gaze locking with his, a silent conversation passing between them, one too heavy for words. Finally, Julian stepped closer, his voice low but steady. "He deserves to know who I am." Amelia's breath hitched, her fingers tightening around her son's. She whispered, "If I tell him, everything changes. For him, for you, for us." Julian's heart pounded as he looked at the boy again, the innocence in his eyes, the quiet trust. Every wall he had built crumbled in that moment. He knew this wasn't just about the past anymore. It was about a future that had been stolen from him, from them. The hook of destiny had caught them both, and there was no turning back. What Amelia would reveal next would decide whether this broken story ended in forgiveness or tore them apart forever.